Good morning, guys. It is Mrs. Donahue. It is July 20th. We are on week 3 of summer school, which means it's our last full week. Next week's only a partial week. And better news, we are on Act 4 of Taming of the Shrew. So you are very close to finished. There's a reason that some of the acts I give you sort of in different ways. One, I think when you teach Shakespeare, you have to teach it using sort of different reading strategies as frequently as you can. It would have been better to do this obviously in live instruction because we would have done a lot of play acting with it. But like I've given you some where it's the translation with notes. I've given you some where it's straightforward question guides. I have given you some where essentially I translated everything for you and you just read it. I did some where you had to go find the definitions and words, and I did some where you just identified things you had questions about or things that you didn't understand. For the most part, you've told me that you're still on the right page. A couple of the words like forsooth and cursed and older vocabulary like that you've had questions on, and that's totally normal, so I'm counting it as a win. However, the scene that we're going over today, Act 4, Scene 3, which is kind of in the deep of Petruchio taming Kate, we do need to talk about. Now, we had what's now my favorite version of this play. I already gave it to you via the Ed puzzle last week, which is the Raul Julia and Meryl Streep 1978 version. I liked it because of how Raul Julia played Petruchio. He was saucier than I've ever seen Petruchio. Petruchio often is played as kind of mean, definitely very alpha dog, very I'm not taking anyone's crap. But there's a line between personality types where you can be, I'm not taking this from you. And you go from being assertive to being a jerk. And Petruchio often crosses the line. Now that line, it's not necessarily a clear-cut thing. There's a lot of times where we just see Petruchio as kind of entertaining, funny, almost frat boy-like. And then suddenly he goes over the line. Many of you said that you understood his behaviors with Kat to be abusive. And I told you that this is always the problem with teaching Taming of the Shrew, is that we as a modern audience, especially reading these behaviors, reading what he's doing, reading what the plan is, we tend to take it more seriously, more literally than maybe we should, especially because as people play this, because Shakespeare didn't leave much in the way of stage direction. The reason there's so much writing is that, as I said, the Globe was very bare bones, had very limited sets, very limited props, so he often had to have his characters talk through everything that was going on. They also have the sort of task of describing what happens off-set. So like Petruchio and Kate's marriage happens off-set. There is no scene where we witness them getting married. All we have is Gremio telling us what happened at the wedding. That's the job of his character. He comes in and says what happened off-set. Good news, they got married. Bad news, this is what happened. So in the first instance that we heard about Petruchio taming Kate, we didn't see much of it. We heard the men of his household, the servants of his household, saying that that was the plan, that we heard she was a much accursed woman. And then we saw some of his behaviors with her through their eyes. Like they said, he took her off to her room and was like yelling and posturing, and she was like cowering. Now, okay, you could play that several different ways. You don't have to play it with her cowering in fear, shivering and shaking, and him screaming his head off at her. You could have it very like him just going, this is not right for her. Everyone, like, come in here, clean this up, get this room settled. Like, you could have a lot of things of that nature, and her just being like, what is happening? If you watch Schitt's Creek, like the Eugene Levy face, she just could not know what's going on and is freaked out in that way. His smartest strategy in dealing with Kate was taking her directly out of her father's house the night of the wedding and like bringing her right to his house dropping her off there, so she's in completely foreign territory. She has no idea where she is. She has no idea what this house is or where her things are. None of her things are with her. They're all like coming later. Imagine that with the clothes on your back right now, you are taken out of state and put in a new house, and the person you're with has kind of an overbearing personality. It's not that you would necessarily be quivering in fear for your life, but you might need some space and some time to acclimate. I say this because you can, of course, portray Petruchio very abusive, and it's easy to go there. It's harder to see this for the comedy that it is. So a kind of gentle warning on scene 3. We are going to be dealing with his methods. And for those of you who remember the notes from Act 4, Scene 1, he compares her to a falcon. So let me explain falcon breaking to you, because none of you have a pet falcon, which is a damn shame. And if any of you do get a pet falcon, remember me fondly when it hatches eggs. I want a falcon. Please. So falcons, hawks, owls, they're birds of prey, right? So they have a natural hunting instinct, and they fly up high, obviously in the air, they have wings. They have really good eyesight because they're sight hunters. They don't smell from the air, so they have to see their prey and then they dive down and get it. Birds of that size would eat rabbits, stuff like that. So hunters, human hunters, we're not spectacularly good hunters, but we're very smart about solving problems. Like, we don't have the sense of smell many predators have. We don't have the eyesight many predators have, but we're good at making other animals do our hunting for us. So you'll notice people have hunting dogs, and they tend to have like either really good sight, really good smell. They tend to either be flushers, which means that they go into small spaces and flush usually birds out of the space, and the birds fly in the air and then the hunters shoot them. Or they're scent hounds, where they will track something. So usually if you're hunting a fox or a deer or a boar, they're an animal that runs and leaves a trail, and the dog smells the trail and shows you where the animal went. Easy. Falcons were used usually more by noble people. I don't know many instances of like farmers having pet falcons or whatever, mostly because they eat meat, and farmers would have been sort of not eating much in the way of meat. But you would have taken a bird, usually preferably a young bird. Kate is young. She might be cast by some of these women that to you look much older, but Kate's probably only in her early 20s, late teens. I mean, at worst, she's in her early 20s because she's still considered marriageable. Too much after like 25, she's stale goods. No one's buying it. So she's young enough. You would have taken this young bird, preferably in good health. You could have sometimes started with an injured bird and then nursed it back to health, and it might have trusted you because you nursed it back to health. But frequently you wanted a healthy bird because you wanted to know that it would survive. Really fun. You wanted to know it would survive the process of being broken in. So, Kate's healthy. You would take this bird, and because they have a strong, assertive personality, they don't want to be pets. They don't want to be owned by you. They don't even want to come back to you. Like, the bird wants to fly away and just stay away. You have to convince the bird to come back to you. Step 1, starve it. Not completely. You don't want to starve it to death. You want to make it so that it knows you bring it food and that it comes back to you. Like every time you open your hand, the bird should be coming over to see what you have in the hand, to see if it's food. So it should think of you as its source. 2, you should keep it awake. Birds only sleep at night, so it's easy enough to keep a bird awake. You just never put it in a dark room. If you have candles, or if you have like kind of reflective fabric of any kind, something shiny, metallic, even water that reflects, you could keep the bird awake. You could also keep the bird awake with loud noise right next to it, like bang, 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 bang. So you keep the bird awake. Why? Because sleep deprivation is incredibly effective. One of you said something to the effect of, you found that to be the single most upsetting strategy that Patricio used. And I joked with you that, like, well, wait till you have kids. So it's illegal if you, like, have a prisoner of war. If we were at war with another country and we took prisoners from them, it would be considered illegal practice, like a violation of fair fighting rule, for us to keep them awake and use sleep deprivation as a means of getting information from them. Like, we would have crossed a technical line. And yet my child can do this to me at will. My 3.5-year-old still does not sleep through the night. I have not had a full night of sleep while living in the same house as her in 3.5 years. And now the baby, who was sleeping like 8 hours through the night, like, he was a champ. He used to go to bed at 8 at night and pretty much sleep till 8 o'clock the next morning. He's getting 3 teeth and he hates life. And therefore he wakes up so cranky. There's nothing like sleeping within a couple feet of another human being, and like, you're asleep and then you just hear because you can get back to sleep so easily after that. Coffee. It's my best friend. You can't drink coffee when you're pregnant. So when I was pregnant with the baby and the toddler was getting me awake every night, I just had to go to work and stare at the kids and stare at them and go, I am so tired right now. So sleep deprivation. It's illegal except when your children do it. Then it's parenting. And it's really, like, one of you said in your response, you were concerned that it would be like the wrong way to get somebody to listen to you. Like, surely you would resent somebody who kept you awake. So you do hate the sleep deprivation. You do. But you eventually are so tired, you don't care. It really, and that happens fast. That happens within, like, I remember when we first brought my daughter home, it was maybe 3 or 4 days of, like, not sleeping more than 3 hours at a time, where we were like, all right, this is just how we live now. Whatever. This is now life. No one will ever sleep again. Sleep doesn't happen. We tag team sleep, naps, maybe if we can fit them in. So because it's a survival instinct, because sleeping is a necessary thing, you can survive something like, you can survive about 9 days without food. You can survive about 7 days without sleep. If you had absolutely zero sleep, like none, I'm not talking cat naps, I'm not talking where you say you've had no sleep, but you've slept like 2 or 3 hours. I'm saying if someone literally did not allow you to sleep, you would die within like a week. It's up there with water. Like, you can only go so many days, I think it's like 4 days without water before you're dead. You know, sleep is a survival mechanism. So after about 3 days, your feelings about it go away. I just explained this to you because you could play Kat a couple different ways in these sequences. One of them is that she's overly emotional and he continues his campaign of getting her to behave to get that emotional response out. Another thing is that you could play her sort of defeated just by the sheer physical toll that it's taking on her. Like, she's tired, she's hungry, she just, how do I get this to stop? You guys may not have had situations like that in your life yet, where you're like, I'm really open to whatever solution we need to get to for this to be resolved. But people get there. Another thing that's going on is potentially that she is really, really emotional, but she's just learned to put a lid on it. So it's there, the emotions in her head, but she's learned to say the right thing, because that's the survival mechanism. Those are like the 3 big camps that you would play her in. Either overly emotional and we got to kill the emotion. Nope, we've already done that. Or I've just learned to do it the right way. The reason I liked the Meryl Streep version so much is that Meryl Streep and Raul Julia took took the opportunity to play this as she is just a very emotional person. She is over the top. She is demanding. And he mirrors it back at her. He parrots it back at her. So, like, you don't see him stomping his foot and throwing a fit until she does. So, like, she comes and she's like, I want better clothes. And he's like, what do your clothes matter? And she's like, I want them. So then he has this beautiful dress made for her and he goes, it's hideous on you. Throw it away. And then she goes, you want to control everything about me. And he goes, me? I want to control your clothes. She says, you want to control my clothes. You want to make a puppet out of me is the phrase she uses. And he goes, I don't. He does. The dressmaker does. In other words, people who expect you to behave like this perfect woman, because that's just what women do. They control you. They want to control you. Your father wants to control you. I want you to understand that they want to control you. He played it in this way where he was like, I like how you behave. It doesn't bother me. Go ahead, scream all you want. It's not going to get you anything. Go ahead, behave any way you want. You're not going to convince me to do something different. You can't break me with that bad behavior. And then he shows her that he behaves just as badly, where he's kind of showing her we are the same. I throw these horrendous fits at my guys and I live kind of like other people wouldn't approve of, and I don't care. I just don't care what other people think about me. I truly don't care. Here's the weird thing. You saw it in the marriage sequence. This is where Shakespeare's actually kind of brilliant. For all that Katerina has been so hated by everyone around her and called a shrew and called these names, they were staring at her the whole time, right? She knows this because she's not deaf, and she says things like, I can see this, I can hear this, I understand what's going on. And in the marriage sequence particularly, she says, everybody's going to look at me. Everybody's going to stop and stare at me. Everybody's going to say that, like, this is how I was treated, and everybody's going to think of me different. She's so aware of what people say about her. In some ways, she might have just been like, if people expect me to behave badly, I'm going to show them how I behave. Like, I will behave so badly. Whereas Petruchio truly does not care. Kat says she doesn't care. I don't care what you think. I don't care what they think. But she does. Petruchio, on the other hand, really, he's like, no, don't care. You guys are at a very weird age for that. A lot of you say you don't care what people think about you. But you do. You might not see that you do because you're so busy telling people you don't. But you do. You will eventually reach a stage where you truly don't. It's very, very rare that I see a teenager who truly is themselves already. I had one student this year that in their yearbook, digital yearbook, I actually said to them, like, you are one of the few teenagers who knows who you are, and you're totally at peace with it. Like, you're totally at peace with, this is what I listen to, this is the music I listen to, and this is the stuff I read, and this is the stuff I watch, and that's who I am. And other people's opinions are great and all, but they're theirs. They're not mine, and I'm not going to change the things I like because other people don't do it. I'm just going to find people who like what I like. A lot of you struggle with that. It was funny that sometimes life kind of has a way of funnily working out. So on Reddit the other day, someone said, why on earth do people read Shakespeare and teach Shakespeare? And I said, if I had to sum it down to one line response on Reddit, I would say that Shakespeare understands humanity better than anyone else, especially in his own time, that's writing. So like saying that there were a lot of people writing plays at Shakespeare's time and saying, well, plays are entertainment. They're sort of like TV for their own time. And Shakespeare just writes entertainment for his own time. That's all he does. That's like saying The Sopranos is just a TV show. Like, The Sopranos remains one of the best written television experiences of all time. It's just incredibly well written. And when The Sopranos dropped, You guys are far too young to understand this. But when The Sopranos dropped, there was literally nothing like it. And ever since The Sopranos dropped, every TV show and its mother are trying to grab a little bit of this success that The Sopranos had, the method The Sopranos used. They are all trying desperately to recreate it. And some of them have success in their own way. The Wire's pretty good. I was a big fan of like Carnival, but it only went one season. The problem is they just can't. For whatever reason, The Sopranos stands alone, and for whatever reason, Shakespeare stands alone. And if you have to stare at that reason, I think the reason becomes the incredible humanness of it. The Sopranos had a way of really treating its characters like normal people navigating these problems in a way that was so relatable and at the same time distant enough that it was entertainment. Shakespeare does the same thing. He has a way of making these characters incredibly relatable if you know how to look. The problem is many people don't know how to look at it because they're so busy trying to figure out the language or trying to shove the language down your throats that they lose track of the fact that there's a lot of interpersonal interaction here. In this sequence, this is my big warning, I think it's interesting to play them like a person who truly doesn't care about outside opinion and just is who he is, with someone he's trying to show how to do that, where he's like, listen, stop retreating into like your defense mechanism. Stop going into the screaming spoiled brat. Stop going into the toddler tantrum. Stop doing it. Listen to me. I don't care that you act like this. They do. And there's a couple ways you can play this. You can always be difficult. Whatever, it's not going to bother me any. But like, wouldn't you love to rub their noses in it? Wouldn't you love to do that? And it's funny because I know the whole time that it's fake and you know it's fake, but they don't. Why don't you learn? I think that is the most fascinating way two actors have played these roles in the many versions of it I've seen. So I was incredibly blown away by that Raul Julia Meryl Streep performance and their read on it, because that's a nuance, a very small interpretation of something that just blew me out of the water. So as you go through Act 4, Scene 3, and the taming of Kate occurs, I want you very much, very, very much, to consider the fact that you are welcome to read them in any of the versions you want. You can read her as fighting him the whole time and him being more of a villain, and her sort of either eventually in Act 5 you'll decide whether he wins or she wins. That's a very common read of Taming of the Shrew, who wins. There's a final speech by Kate that's a big deal. You already saw it, but we're going to go over it again because you're going to have to look at that one 2 or 3 times before you really state an opinion on it. There's a final scene where she obeys him, and a lot of people spend pages and pages and pages of academic writing trying to figure out what it means. You could read this scene like her and him in a constant battle, and one of them always gaining the upper hand. You could read it as the slow changing of her. Like, she changes, and therefore this is the moment of change. Some people read that change as like, good for you. Other people read it as very sad. Sometimes the people who read it as like, good for you, are going to blame history for it and say, well, people back then would have really liked that she became obedient. So we have to read this as a happy thing. We don't. I mean, this is a James I era play, but that means that the people have just come off of 60 years of Queen Elizabeth, who was a very non-traditional woman. That sums her up in the most, inefficient way I could. But like Elizabeth Rex, the woman who proposed marrying a Spanish princess because she was more entertaining than the Spanish prince, you think that we don't know how to deal with irregular women, or we hate them and we need all of them to behave? I mean, no, we don't. That's the short answer. No, we don't. There have always been exceptions to the rules. There are women who exist in Shakespeare's time of fairly good standing who do not behave like everyone else. You have to be particularly good at being bad if you're going to be bad. If you're going to go against the grain, you have to be really good at it. So if Kate was, like if she figured out how to say, secretly do that, but say the right things and act the right way, she'd totally be given a pass on it. People who blame history and say, like, we have to read that because it's history, often lose the fact that history had a lot more diversity, a lot more interpretation than we have the ability to adequately summarize. It's not as clear cut as back then things were different. I mean, they were, but it's not that simple. Or you could read it the way that I'm sort of encouraging you to read it. Not that you have to agree with me. I really want to put that out there. You should read these plays in the way that makes sense to you. That's why I try so many different ways. Try in different interpretations. I'll stop and I'll say the lines differently to you. Because I really truly believe that you need to kind of hit your own reading on it. You don't have to agree with me to get an A in this class. You don't. Anyone who says differently is not doing their job correctly. You can disagree with me all the time and get A's in my class. For a minute, I'd like to look at some of the lines that you're about to see in this scene and show you how they could be read differently. So buckle up. We're going to do some Shakespeare.